Okay, so today we are going to key out several of these plants. Now, one of the things I want you to look for is you can see here I have a picture of some of the seeds, some of the flower, and some of the leaves, which is all necessary for identifying this. Now, with this particular key, find ourselves getting all the way through to Magnoliaphida, but just for the sake of working through a key, we'll start here and seeing that if we started with 1 and we see that stems are terminated with a strobilus sori flowers. Woody cones are never present, so it's not, that's not the case. There are woody flowers at the terminus here, so we go to the other one and finds that stems without a strobilus, and we see that sori cones or flowers are present, so we go to 3. And we read 3 and says spores produced in a sporangia borne upon the leaves, and we can already see that there are no sporangia, and so we move to the next 3. Spores not produced on the leaves. Okay, that's where we're at. Various leaves, various tips not coiled, flowers or woody cones present. So we can go to 4. Flowers absent. Okay, nope, not that one. Next one, flowers present, seeds borne in enclosed ovary, plants woody or herbaceous. So that's the one. Okay, we're in division Magnoliaphida. Okay, so now we're trying to find out which group to go to here, and we'll read the first one, perianth consisting of sepals or lacking, sepals when present resembling petals in color and or shape. And if we go back to the last slide or through the next one, we see that that is not the case. So we look and see perianth consisting of both sepals and petals. That is correct because there are distinct sepals and petals on this. So we move to 3 and we go petals united at least slightly. And this is the case. There are some of the petals, if you notice in this, that are united. And so we look to find group 3. Okay, so with these slides, we can see some of the floral parts, and all of these slides are going to be important later on. Now, one of the main things is we're going to look at this position of this ovary here, and we're going to be looking at the number of stamens, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then this style here, we can see that it does have some hairs, but they're in a specific orientation. Okay, and as those come in later, we'll see. And then even further down, we're going to find that the size difference between some of the petals is significant, but we'll get to that as we key more. Okay, we're over here in group 3. And so we start keying right away, and to find out if the ovary is inferior, partly inferior, or superior, and in this case we saw that the ovary was superior. And so we move to 9 and we look to see if there are more than 5 stamens or fewer than 5 or equal to 5, and we saw that there were more than 5 stamens. So we move to 10 and to see if the petals were united. There were separate petals, so petals not united or with 2 petals united in Leguminosae. So that is us here. We can move on to 12. And we're asking if there was a regular or an irregular corolla. Now, these petals were different from one another, and they are irregular in their shape. So we're going with 13 and asking if the corolla is papilionaceous, and it is, and we're going to talk about what that means. And so we see that this is in Leguminosae or Fabaceae. Okay, so we can come over here and read that word and see that what it means. Okay, all right. Is butterfly-like as the irregular corolla of a pea with a banner petal, 2 wing petals, and 2 fused keel petals. And you can see the top part of the illustration here. I should have included the rest of it, but so there's a large banner petal, 2 side wing petals, and 2 fused keel petals at the bottom. So we get to come over here, and there were united filaments. Okay, so the second one under the number 1. So we moved to 2, and there were no dotted glands. There were no dotted glands right there. So we can move to, on the leaves, we can move to 4 and read that there were leaves with or without tendrils. And I included a picture so you could see that there were tendrils there. And so we move to 5, and styles filiform with the ring of hairs circling their tip. Now, we didn't read what filiform means, but we did know that there was not hair circling the tip, but that the style was flattened with pubescent hairs not in a ring. Okay, now, so that tells us the genus here is Lathyrus, and we can move to Lathyrus. Now, that is something that you can use if you are stuck with a word and you don't have your book or you don't want to look it up. You can read the next option, and if that is very clearly it, like in this case, you then can know that is your genus. So here we are in Lathyrus. We can see if there are leaflets too, stems strongly winged, but that's not the case because there are 4 or more leaflets. Notice here multiple leaflets, but angled stems, not strongly winged. And we can then move to 2, where we see keel much shorter than the corolla wings. And we can see that this keel portion of the flower is shorter than all of the other flowers. And we find that this here, that Lathyrus passiflorus var Utahensis, is this particular flower. Okay, when we go through this here, we're going to get down to petals united at least slightly there on group 3 right here. We've been through this, so I'm going to cut through some of it, and we'll move on to group 3. And when we get over here to group 3, we can start with 1, where we can say ovary inferior or partly so 2. And there are inferior ovaries here. And so we've moved to 2, or at least partly so. And then we can see that stamens united by their anthers. And when we get in close here, we can see that that is the case. And we'll move on to 3 and see the plants do or do not have tendrils. And I don't have the plant here, but it does not have tendrils that had leaves that were arrow-shaped sagittal leaves. And so we looked at the inflorescence, or the flowers, is in a head like this, and it's compositae or Asteraceae. Okay, and here we have one of these individual flowers with those few stamens and an ovary in here that is individual. But let's go through here and find heads with ray flowers only. So there were both ray and disc flowers, heads with both ray and disc flowers. So we can know that we're going to 2. And heads with disc flowers only, that is not what this is, so we can go here. Heads with both ray flowers and disc flowers, ray flowers sometimes small, so on to 3. Pappus of capillary bristles. Now a pappus is it's going to be right in here and along here, and there are no bristles, no capillary bristles. There's actually nothing. A pappus is completely lacking. There could be little scales or hairs in this area, but it's lacking. So that actually brings us here to key 4. Okay, so here we are in key 4, and we see we can immediately go here to this second number 1 with rays being yellow. So we're here at 6. And it's asking if the receptacles are not chaffy, or if they are chaffy at least on the outer edge. And chaffy is chaff with chaff-like, And chaff is thin, dry scales or bracts, as the bracts on the receptacle of the heads of Compositae. So this situation, the plant is chaffy, has chaff on the outer edge. And seeing that the plants are annual or glandular viscid above, and they were not glandular in any part of the plant, and they were not annual, they're a perennial and not glandular. So here we are on to 8. So we've got leaves variously dissected or sagittate. And now sagittate, when we look at here, is arrowhead shaped with the basal lobes directed downward. And if you remember from the video, the leaves on this were very arrow shaped and sagittate. So here we are at Balsamorrhiza, and we've actually got this genus right here. And leaves entire or nearly so, sagittate. And the leaves were entire, they're shaped like this. And so we see we've got Balsamorrhiza sagittata. So we look here to start and see that the perianth does consist of both sepals and these petals. And so we can move to 3, and we see that the petals are separate here, and that the stamens are few, not more than twice as many as the petals. Okay, when we count these, there are not more than twice as many of the petals. So we find ourselves here in group 5. And we're looking at a flower with a single pistil. This is the pistil right here. So we move to 5, and we see styles 2 to 5 distinct near the base. And we'll look and see that this is essentially what the female reproductive parts look like. So we see style sometimes lobed or divided at the apex, or represented by 3 feathery stigmas. And so that's where we're headed here to 17. So here we are at 17, and asking if there is an inferior or superior ovary. And in this case, we've actually got an inferior ovary, which we'll look at a little bit later. And so we're going to 18, and it was an herbaceous plant. There was no woodiness. So we're going to 19, and we see that the flowers, one is removed here, okay, but is 4 meris. So there are 4 petals, 1, 2, 3, and then the one that was removed, so we could see this. And so we're in Onagraceae. All right, so here in Onagraceae, we see that the flowers are not in a narrow elongated spike panicle. And so we are looking to see if there are sepals and petals 4, stamens usually 8. That's our case here. So we're going to 3. Seeds, ovules with a tuft of hair at one end, seeds, ovules without a tuft of hair. And we're actually going to be able to see, or at least discuss later, that this is the case. So we're going to move to 5. And hypanthium not extending beyond the top of the ovary. That's definitely not the case. The hypanthium is this long tube that we'll look at in a minute, and we'll see that it is extending beyond the top of the ovary. And filaments attached to the middle of the anthers, petals white or yellow, often pink or red in older flowers. Now, this is the case that the flowers are pink or red in the older flowers, and the filaments are attached to the middle of the anthers. And so we found 7, and we move on to 7. So this is saying the first 7 is stigmas hemispheric to subglobose, entire or rarely 4-lobed, when we can see that this is very clearly 4-lobed. Stigmas deeply 4-cleft is anathera. And so we'll move on to that and see, are the flowers yellow or white or turning pinkish when older? So that's the case. We are at 3. And plants without well-developed stems or nearly so. And we actually can see in the video that this has very little stem. So that's the case. So we're moving to 4. I keep bumping that. And We can ask if the hypanthium is mostly 7 to 14 centimeters long, or the petal is 3 to 6 centimeters long, or if the hypanthium is 3 to 8 centimeters with the petals 2 to 4. Now, I did not measure this, and so we're going to know, though, from the last page and this, that it is this Onathera cespitosa, and we can then, with a proper measurement of this hypanthium, we can then determine which variety it is from here, but just for the purpose of this video, we've keyed it to this place. Okay, this is a plant that you'll see quite a bit, and we're going to have worked through again in this situation where there are sepals and petals, some sepals, some petals, and that there are a few stamens, not more than twice as many as the petals. So we're going to move on to group 5. And we'll see that there is a single pistil, and we can move to 5 and see that there are styles 2 to 4 distinct near the base. And as we look inside of this, we'll see that there are multiple styles that are distinct near the base. So we're moving on to 6. And here we are talking about the distinct styles. And this plant was herbaceous, so we're moving to 11. And we can look and see that there is a superior ovary. So we have moved to alternate leaves, meaning leaves like this, as opposed to leaves like this. So we are going to 14, and we can see that there are more than 2 sepals, although, you know, one is here, these 2 are here, but there were more than 2 sepals. So we're going to 15 and seeing if there is a hypanthium. There is not a hypanthium here, and so the hypanthium is absent, which leads us to this here with flowers being violet, purple, bluish, or yellow in Linnaceae. So see here, when we get to Linnaceae, there are petals, violet, blue, rarely white. And this is listing Linnaceae perenni there. And that is actually an introduced Eurasian species. And the only way to tell this from Lewisii or Lewis flax is that the Lewis flax is heterostylic. And what that means is that within an individual plant, the flowers will have different lengths of style, as is illustrated here. So there's one length, here's another length, and there's that definition there. And on this particular plant, the styles were of different length and is therefore likely the native Lewis flax, but that's not an option in this key. So if you turned it in with this as the answer, I would absolutely accept that. Okay, so here we are back in Magnoliophyta. If we walk through this, it's going to take us to group 3 because we've got sepals and petals, but we've got united petals. Okay, you can see here that they are united. And so we've moved into group 3, and we're going to see here later that there is a superior ovary, which will move us to the next page of our key. This particular slide has several features we're going to want to pay close attention to. One here is the position of the ovary. Another will be if this is lobed, which it is not. And also this stamen that is coming off of this piece of this united corolla, you can see that it is alternate with the division between the petals. That's why it came off kind of along this center line here. Oh, So let's keep that in mind as we begin the rest of our keying process. Okay, so we made it here to 9, which is based upon our ovary position. And we can see that there are 5 or fewer stamens, so we're going to move on to 15, that the plants are green, so we will move to 17, and the curl is very regular, so we've moved on to 22. 22 plants with milky juice, pistils 2 separate at base. Plants without milky juice, pistil 1. That was this case, there is the 1 pistil, and without the milky juice, we're moving on to 24. And the stamens being opposite the corolla lobes or stamens alternate within the corolla lobes. So that is where we are. 25 corolla small, leaves parallel veined or nearly so. That is not the case. The corolla is larger and the leaf veins were not parallel. So we've moved on to 26. And the ovary was not 4-lobed. We pointed that out, so we're moving on to 27. And the style, which you could see there was 3 cleft, and which brings us to Polymoniaceae. Okay, so we're in Polymoniaceae, where we have looked to see if the leaves were entire or pinnate or palmately lobed, and you could see that the leaves were like this on a taller stalk. Okay, so the leaves are entire, and calyx lobes uniformly green. Those were not. 2 calyx lobes alternately green and white. That is the case. So we've now moved on to plants annuals with single stems. They were not annuals and they had multiple stems. So we've moved on to plants perennials with multiple stems. So we have found phlox as our genus. Now, there are 2 options in phlox with matted cespitose plants, spiny phlox here. But longleaf phlox is dense clusters with the shoots erect, and that's longifolia. And this is what we have here. We had phlox longifolia, and in the earlier videos, we actually also identify, or at least look at, spiny phlox. And so you can go back to the Book Cliffs tour, for example, and see some spiny phlox. But the Provo Canyon video will have this longleaf phlox for us to find. And that's the end of this video.